Hey everybody, it's Miss Solomon here, and welcome back to the guided readings. In this video, we're looking at Book 3 of the Iliad. This is sometimes called the Techoscopia, Techoscopia, or Viewing from the Walls, because Helen appears on the walls of Troy. More so, it's also where Paris and Menelaus face off in a duel that could, in theory, end the entire Trojan War. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But let's walk through some key passages together. So this first section of the video of book 3, I want to focus on where Paris challenges the Greeks, kind of at the outset. He's already had enough audacity to take Helen all of those years ago, and now here we are again. With Paris challenging the army that he's been fighting. And, the Greeks want to bring Helen home. So on page 185, start with the first line and read along with me. So we're on page 185, start of book 3. When all the warriors had been assembled, arranged in proper order with their leaders, the Trojans marched with calls and cries like birds, just like the cries of cranes across the sky when they escape torrential winter rains and fly away toward the streams of ocean, and bring destruction to the pygmy people. Out of the air they strike and start the conflict. The Greeks march silently, breathing aggression, their hearts determined to protect each other. Isn't that beautiful? As on the peaks of some high mountaintop, the south wind, notice, pours a fog so thick that nobody can see beyond a stone's throw, unwelcome to the shepherds, but for thieves, better than not. So rose the clouds of dust beneath their feet. They hurtled at such speed across the plain. As they drew near each other, the fighter at the forefront of the Trojans was godlike Paris Alexander, wearing a cloak of panther skin draped round his shoulders. He held a curving bow and a sword, and brandished 2 spears, both tipped with bronze. He stood in front and summoned all the bravest Greeks to fight him hand to hand in deadly combat. When Menelaus, friend of Ares, god of war, noticed Paris come striding out before the crowd, he was delighted, because Menelaus was Helen's husband that Paris stole Helen from. As a starving lion is thrilled to come upon a massive carcass. Now it gets juicy. A stag with antlers or a mountain goat, and avidly begins to eat the flesh, even if eager hunters and quick hounds attack him in the same way. Menelaus was thrilled to set his eyes on godlike Paris, believing he would make the culprit pay. So tense. So here they are, ready to challenge. Paris is like, who wants to fight me? Menelaus is like, I volunteer as tribute. So notice how in this section, Paris is introduced. He's flashy, he's beautiful, but not exactly intimidating. He's dressed more like someone showing off in a pageant more than a warrior. So right away, Homer sets up a contrast between Paris's appearance and his effectiveness. Paris may have caused this whole war, but he doesn't embody the warrior virtues that Menelaus or even Hector do, who we'll meet in just a few minutes. This is important because Paris represents eros, or desire and passion, not arete, spelled Arete, with the overscore, which arete stands for excellence or heroic virtue. He's Paris, this eros mentality of desire and passion, is the foil for warriors who embody this kind of marital honor, this martial honor that arete symbolizes. People like arete, meaning like Hector and Menelaus, who do it for the virtue and the heroism. It's a little bit different for Paris. So here, still on page 186, I hope you're still here with me in the book. I love this next part because Hector brings the heat. In this second section of the video, I want to read aloud and explain where Hector, this leading warrior for the Trojans, and Hector is Paris's brother, he rebukes Paris for this very challenge. In very great language. So let's read it. Page 186, starting around line 49-ish, 48. Here we go. Pathetic Paris, womanizer, cheat. You are the very best at looking pretty. Oh, how I wish that you had never lived or died unmarried. That would be far better than life as such an object of contempt. The Greeks will surely laugh at you and say you look so handsome, like a champion, but in your heart there is no will to fight, no courage. Yet, despite your feebleness, you gathered up a crew of trusty men and sailed in sturdy ships across the sea to intermingle with foreigners and brought a pretty woman back with you, whose relatives by marriage are strong spearmen. You brought great suffering to us all, to your own father, city, and our people. You pleased our enemies, but shamed yourself. How could you not face warlike Menelaus? You ought to know the man whose wife you took. The gifts of Aphrodite will not help you. Your lyre, your hair, your attractiveness, when you are lying mingled in the dust. The Trojans are such cowards. If they were not, they would have dressed you in a shirt of rocks for all the evils you have perpetrated. Says this to his own brother. So it's easy to say that Hector is he's over it. He is so over it. He's over Paris's entire aura, what he's about, and everything that he's caused during this war. And he's not just over it, Hector calls Paris out in front of everybody. So this is just a public shaming to add salt in the wound. Even in Homer's sympathetic context, and Homer will, and this is what's so rich and why I get nerdy and why I love teaching so much of this particular story of this semester. Hector is the one that embodies the ideal warrior, especially in the beginning. He's brave, he's responsible, he's protective of Troy. Paris, in contrast, is seen as cowardly. So this dynamic between brothers highlights different Greek ideas of manhood. Hector is based on courage and responsibility, where Paris is based on beauty and charm. And this contrast will keep coming up. It will be a battle between these two pictures of manhood over and over again until we have a conclusion about both, and each man will be representative of the fates of each type. And it's not overly sad, and it's not overly warm either, which adds to the complexity of this wonderful story. So now let's move on to the third part of the book, or at least the third part of this video about book 3, that is important to highlight, at least from my perspective. So it's when Paris proposes the duel. So it's in response to his brother's rebuke, but then it kind of goes outward. He says something right, I think, and excites the rest of the of the scene for this duel. So if you're still on page 186, down there toward the bottom, starting around line 74, it looks like, Paris says this: Hector, it is quite reasonable for you to scold me in this way. Your heart is always tough as an axe that slices through a tree used by a skillful man to build a ship. It magnifies the power of the man. The spirit in your heart is just as fearless, but do not blame me for the lovely gifts of golden Aphrodite. Glorious gifts that come from gods that they themselves have given must not be thrown away, although no human chooses them willingly. Now, if you want me to fight in battle and to join the war, you must line up the other Greeks and Trojans, and in the middle of them all, set me to fight Menelaus, friend of Ares, for Helen, and for all the wealth and treasure. And let the winning man, the stronger fighter, get all the wealth and take the woman home. The rest of you must sacrifice and swear a solemn oath of friendship. Make your homes in fertile Troy and let the Greeks return to Greece, where horses pasture in the fields and women are most beautiful. So, in other words, we could settle the score today with a duel between Paris and Menelaus. So, a little further down on page 187, Hector will address both armies and officially propose the duel. Menelaus will speak into page 188 to solidify the duel. Menelaus for the Greeks and then Paris for the Trojans. They'll stand representative for the two sides of the war in this high stakes proposal of single combat. Winner takes Helen and the war ends. It's neat, it's dramatic, but of course, as we'll see, it won't stick. Still, the idea is significant. It reminds us that the war could have alternatives, but human pride and divine intervention, as we'll find, usually get in the way. So here we are again, ladies and gentlemen. A fight with a woman at the center, the woman who launched 1,000 ships. And at least that's how she's tagged so popularly. So now I want to move into this fourth section of the video about book 3 for us to focus on Helen on the Walls. It's almost like all the visioning for modern cinema started in ancient Greece with this epic, because the way the narrative shifts from this point, like height of war, let's go, single combat, to Helen on the walls of Troy is so intimate. It's like you've got all this big stage out here, and then you move to this intimate moment to where you kind of be like an observer of the thing. This narrative technique, or also called tychoscopia, appears first in the epic and dramatic poetry, where characters stand on a city wall or a high vantage point and they look over a battlefield, a landscape, or a significant scene. So a techoscopia, while they do so, it's often used to describe what they see to others, essentially functioning as a kind of commentary or guided description. So we're going to go like on a little side quest with a tychoscopia with Helen on the walls of Troy. So starting on page 189, about halfway down, King Priam of Troy will invite Helen to sit with him and watch the battle. He engages her in conversation about who a certain soldier is on the battlefield, which is a sign to us as readers that King Priam is exhibiting his empathy for her in this situation. I really love Priam. He's a good man who must deal with such an unfortunate circumstances when he's a leader. It just kind of sucks. So Helen, on page 189, is going to respond to Priam's ignition of this conversation, starting around line 210. So let's look at it. It's so beautiful. Father-in-law, I love you and respect you. I wish that I had chosen painful death the day that I came here with your son and left my bedroom, kinsman, late born precious daughter, and cherished group of women friends. I did not. That is why I have melted into tears. But I can give an answer to your question. That man you see down there is Agamemnon, whose power spreads across a wide expanse of land. Agamemnon is also Menelaus's brother. He is a skillful leader and a strong spear fighter, and he was once a kinsman through his brother, the former husband of my dog-faced self. If any of these things took place at all. So, for the first time in our reading of the book, we get to hear Helen herself. It's maybe not what you would expect, but I'll kind of want to go off script here for a minute and talk you a bit through some of the different ways that Helen will be perceived and written about in ancient literature. And I think that it will drive home why her response to Priam's question is written in such a sympathetic manner. So in my lifetime, I have heard Helen called 3 different names: Helen of Argos, Helen of Sparta, and Helen of Troy. So let's break that down a little bit. Helen of Argos is her political moniker. It stands for the broader Greek world and emphasizes her as a member of the Greek collective identity rather than just her Spartan royalty. So that's Helen of Argos. Helen of Sparta connotes her legitimacy, her origins, and her lawful marriage. Sparta is where she's from, and it emphasizes her role as wife and queen, the woman who belongs to a stable, lawful husband. But then Helen of Troy is the not nice label. It connotes her as an other, and it's got just these essences of betrayal and scandal. So, unfortunately, Helen of Troy is the name most people know her by today, but in Homeric terms, this is alienating. To call her Helen of Troy, even in your own writing, would carry a connotation of shame and blame, since it ties Helen to the city responsible for Greek suffering. And so at the same time, yes, it does give her this like legendary glamour as the beautiful woman who belongs to the city that defied the Greeks. But then it's a name that she didn't choose, and she has not chosen to be in any of these scenarios. So those are the 3 ways that she will often be called: Helen of Argos, Helen of Sparta, and Helen of Troy. But here in the book, what we just read, she's just Helen. Homer depicts her as a complex human being who is also a prisoner in this war, like everybody around her. She has feelings and is doing the best with the hand that she's been dealt, like all of us try to do. She's not painted as a villain in this epic, not once, not ever. She's reflective, she's self-aware, and burdened by guilt. She's human like us. So when you write, keep these different phrases in mind where Helen's identity is concerned. So let's go back to the text. We see Helen, they're talking on the walls of Troy. And she points out Agamemnon, of course, Odysseus, and others. She calls herself a dog, which is sad, but she's blaming herself for the war, carrying that guilt. And I love this section because it gives us a rare female perspective in the epic, as she's both self-condemning, but then she's insightful. She knows her role in the conflict, but she also voices the regret. And so this moment also functions like a catalog of the Greek leaders too, because, Priam will ask the question, well, who's that? And then Helen's like, oh, it's this guy, and back and forth. And so you get this chronicle of all of these great warriors on the Greek side that Helen would know. It gives us even more insight into her characterization, and we get all of these warriors' characterization through her perception as well, which is no small thing. So let's move to the actual duel. um, it begins, and eek. Priam is brought down from the walls of Troy after having this conversation with Helen. The forces are all going to line up. Priam addresses them all, and he proclaims that Zeus and the other deathless gods must know which of the two has been ordained to die. It's very dramatic. Hector speaks to everyone too. There's a great detail about the stances of both men, and the battle begins on page 194. It's a fun cinematic read all the way down the page. This duel should have decided everything, theoretically. Menelaus is clearly the stronger fighter. He nearly kills Paris. In fact, it looks like the war might end right here in book 3. They continue to fight, but right on cue, Aphrodite appears and snatches Paris from the battle on page 195. Here we are. This last bit of the book is so interesting to me. So after Aphrodite, who is sympathetic to the Trojan cause, obviously, she plucks Paris from the battle. She has more tricks up her sleeve. So peace through the duel was possible, but this divine interference keeps the war alive. Helen's going to play a part now. Helen's smart, but she's still powerless. So if you're on page 95 and you read along with me, kind of toward the middle of the page, starting at line 476. And this is just the poet speaking. So after she's taken Paris out of the battle, next, the goddess went off to summon Helen, whom she found upon the high wall with some Trojan women. She plucked at Helen's scented dress, disguised in look and voice as the old spinning woman who fashioned pretty woolen clothes for her in Sparta when she lived there, who had loved her. How manipulative is that? To take the image of the spinning woman who made clothes for Helen, and she would recognize her and be like, oh, wow, of course, this is somebody I can trust. So in this guise, heavenly Aphrodite said, come here. Paris is calling you back home. He is inside the bedroom on the knotted bed. His clothes are dazzling. So is his beauty. You would not think he just came from fighting. He seems like someone ready to go dancing or just stop dancing, sitting down to rest. With these words, Aphrodite roused her, meaning Helen's, feelings. She saw the goddess had a throat and a neck of most extraordinary beauty, breasts to stir desire, and bright shining eyes. So Helen wasn't fooled. She was astonished, and she said, you, goddess? Why do you want to trick me in this way? Will you keep leading me to yet more cities? If there is some mortal man you love in any of them? Now Menelaus has defeated Paris and wants to take me home with him again, although I am so hateful. Is that why you come to me now with these tricks of yours? Then go to him yourself and sit beside him. Give up the path of gods and let your feet never turn back again to Mount Olympus. Spend all your time on taking care of Paris, crying for him until he makes you either his slave girl or his wife. But I will not ever go back. It would bring retribution, and I will never service that man's bed. All of the Trojan women in the future will blame me if I do, and in my heart I will endure more pain than I can measure. So she's like, I'm not going. Menelaus, my real husband, just won this, and I'm going home. And we continue. Glorious Aphrodite, furious, says, "Stubborn girl, you must not make me angry, or in my rage I will abandon you, and start to loathe you with as deep a passion as I have loved you as my friend till now. I shall devise a strategy to make you loathed and abhorred by both the Greeks and Trojans, and you shall die a dreadful death." And so this is kind of the connotation of what we mean by Helen of Troy. And at least in the epic, this connotation is born. Continuing on the page 196. So at this rebuke by Aphrodite, Helen, the child of Zeus, was terrified. She wrapped her bright white cloak around herself and slipped away in silence, secretly, so that the Trojan women did not notice. The goddess led the way, and when they reached the marvelous house of Paris, slaves were quickly scurrying around to do their work. But Helen, the godlike woman, went up to the bedroom, and Aphrodite, who loved smiles, was there. She drew a chair for her and set it down across from Paris Alexander. Helen, the child of Zeus, who bears the aegis, sat there. Her eyes would not meet his. She spoke and scolded her husband. So here's Helen speaking. She's gone there. She's with Paris. And she says this. "So you came back from fighting. I wish that you had died out there, defeated by that strong man who used to be my husband. Before you claimed you were superior to warlike Menelaus in your strength and hands and spear. So go on, challenge him. Call Menelaus back again to fight you. But no, I'll order you to stop. Do not make war and fight with ruddy Menelaus. It would be idiotic. You would soon lose and lie dead beneath the fighter's spear." So you can see how Helen feels about this whole situation, especially how she feels about Paris. Not good. Then Paris answered, "Do not scold me, wife, with so much criticism of my courage. It is true Menelaus beat me this time, thanks to Athena. Next time I shall beat him. We also have some gods on our side. But come now, let us go to bed and take pleasure in making love. I never felt desire like this unfolded all around me, not even when I first took you away by ship across the sea from lovely Sparta, and afterwards upon the Isle of Crane I shared a bed with you and we made love. Not even then was I so seized by sweet desire for you." He led her to the bed. His wife came with him, and the two of them lay there together on the well-made bed. So here you kind of see how, even though Helen's like, that he can use, I'm not going to do wifely duties for him. Under the panoptic gaze of a god, though, she's kind of forced to. So continuing. But meanwhile, Menelaus paced around all through the crowd like some wild animal trying to catch a glimpse of godlike Paris. None of the Trojans or the noble allies could find where Paris was, though if they had, they would not have concealed him out of friendship. Indeed, the Trojans all detested Paris, as if he were Black Death. So Agamemnon's not really making a good name for himself, even on the home team. Then Agamemnon, the lord of men, said, "Listen to me now, Trojans, Dardanians, and allied fighters. It must be obvious that Menelaus has won this duel. So you must give back Greek Helen and the wealth and treasure with her, and pay a proper compensation too, so people in the future will remember." The Greeks approved of the words of Agamemnon, and the war continues. So in sum, I kind of want to recap all of that a bit. So we've set the stage for the entire rest of the epic. The war is going to drag on, not just because of human pride, but because the gods are going to play their own games, as Aphrodite did here with both Paris and Helen. But notice the irony. The duel for Helen ends with Paris being placed back into the original space where he was. Um, he wasn't triumphant, and he was the one who challenged this very thing anyway. So we're just kind of going in circles. And I think it's interesting too how we see a parallel on how books 1 and 3 end with a bed scene, pretty much. The war continues in both cases, but the power dynamic is so different. Helen is forced to go to bed with Paris again under the leering eye of Aphrodite, despite Helen's proclamation that she just would not. But the gods' dominion is going to win. And just like it won in book 1, the war is going to continue to bring Helen back home. So, book 3, on the whole, we're seeing this contrast between men like Paris and Hector, and they give us 2 different models of heroism and what it means to be a man. It shows Helen's perspective, adding depth to her role in the war, and it emphasizes how divine intervention undermines human attempts at resolution. In many ways, this book 3 is like a microcosm for the entire Iliad. You've got pride, passion, and the gods. And the gods keep everything going always, and it's going to be like that. Even when peace seems possible, sure, Paris or Menelaus would have had to die, but then it would have saved so many other people, and the war would finally end after these long 10 years. So as you read on, keep an eye on how this duel will echo in moments late and much later in a even bigger, more resolving duel toward the end. So thank you so much for joining me for book 3. I love this section, and I'm glad that we got to read it together, and I hope that you will come back again to discuss other sections with me.